Compendium of Chrysopoeia. Written by Joannes Aurelius Augurellus. Book 1. First, it must be noted that fire is the governor and instrument of all operations performed on metals, such as sublimation, calcination, and fusion. Next, every body, animal, vegetable, or mineral, whether simple or composite, naturally desires to produce something similar to itself. Indeed, whatever fire finds, it tries to convert into fire, just as all other elements do, unless they are hindered by some greater force. Composite bodies, such as plants, produce shoots from their own seed, just as animals do, in order to generate something like themselves, for their natural purpose and use. In the same way, minerals such as metals and gems have a generative spirit, by which they receive all changes of generation and corruption in their nature. The reason why we do not perceive them generating similar things, converting and transmuting others into their nature, is because their generative spirit is enclosed in thick and hard matter. This spirit is called vital, since it gives all life to metals. Unless it is drawn out by the industry of the artist from the coarse mass in which it lies hidden, it can have neither motion nor exert its power and efficacy. All things in nature, indeed, in the entire structure of the world, are composed of body and soul, and together with a spirit that is the medium between body and soul, joining the two and being the cause of all change in the composite, for the purpose of transmutation, generation, and preservation of the like. Thus, the spirit enclosed in the mass of gold ultimately requires the hand of the artist to liberate it from prison and make it master of its own powers. And if one can, by the benefit of art, extract and produce it, and then place it for some time to decoct in gentle heat, one will see something marvelous. Gold, by long use of the multiplying seed, has life, and it will be clear that gold is generated from gold. Hence it is that gold is not only formed naturally under the earth but also artificially above the earth. There are many kinds of foreign waters by which some have attempted to dissolve types of metals. But if you strive to bring yourself out of darkness into light, you must seek waters from other sources, by which gold dissolves gently in its own water without any violence, and without the help of another liquid. And just as anything is not generated from anything other than its own kind, in which lie hidden the spermal seeds of what is generated, so too should you not seek the principles of gold elsewhere. In gold are the seeds of gold, though deeply hidden and to be sought by us with great effort. And do not think that the water you are seeking is like sea water, rain water, or even clear and transparent like spring water. You must carefully understand another thing, that it neither stains nor moistens anything it touches. For it appears completely dry, like a powder, but softens and becomes moist and liquid in the inner parts of the triturated gold. The ancient philosophers introduced other waters to deceive the ignorant, though they themselves used the very waters we are speaking of, adding nothing foreign to them, and placed these waters, after composition, to gentle decoction in a small furnace. Hermes was the first to teach men this most noble art, and by its benefit one can cure all diseases, preserve youth for a long time, delay and prolong old age, embrace virtues, flee vices, and practice charity, thus fulfilling one's wishes and passing one's life accordingly. Book 2. First, it must be known that the white stone transforms imperfect metals into silver, and the red one into gold. Therefore, the artist must care for nothing more than to know the first materials from which this work can be composed, which he must first take in hand and upon which he must labor. Then, for the first time, he will feel and know himself to be a true servant of nature, when he skillfully extracts the noble seed from its hiding place where it had been concealed, brings it to light, and then places it again in darkness, preserves it enclosed in a small vessel, and gently provides the moist nourishment to the putrid mass. Nor will he be less clever and diligent if, in the meantime, he provides it with gentle heat, and cherishes the internal heat or fire with the external warmth and fire. However, he must be careful not to mix in things of different kinds, but as much as he can, he should avoid and flee from them. O slow, stupid, and blind minds of men! O minds subject to the deceptions of artists! What do sweet and tender wines have in common with hard metals? What has human blood drawn from the body to do with them? What have golden hair from the head? What have eggs? What have herbs gathered from mountaintops in common with gold dug from the caverns of mountains? All who use such means labor in vain, since, while they try to join together different species, one impedes the other in its first movement, so that they can generate nothing in nature that is truly united. For in the beginning you must establish and presuppose that what is needed in this work is contained in a single thing, so that there is no need to seek anything outside of it, except for the moisture, which is more than sufficient and is preserved within until at last that which you desire and so eagerly wish to be generated comes forth. Moreover, know that there is within it a double force, one always active, the other passive, so that the male and female may have their mutual motion together, just as the chick grows in the egg, which is at once acting and being acted upon, except that it is cherished and preserved by a gentle external warmth. You will find no example more fitting than this, nor one to which, in my judgment, you should more surely cling, by which all things may be understood. For nothing can be generated from any matter unless it is first putrefied. And note that in this work you need nothing but one vessel, one method of regulation, and one matter, and by the same art and process you are able to generate and produce gems. There is a forest on the summit of a secret mountain, in which springs a fountain of silver and shining water, and there is a cavern containing a hollowed and excavated grotto, in which resides a maiden, powerful and of divine virtue, whom the country folk of old called by the name Glaria. A narrow, rough, and steep path leads with difficulty through thick brambles to the threshold of the cave. In front of this threshold lies a smooth and level, though not wide, plain, covered with dreadful shadows, the river's banks and the gravelly margin, as well as with green moss and thick flowering clusters. But if someone enters successfully, he immediately, and this is a wonder, casts off all human impurity and lays aside the mortal burden, and becomes entirely spirit, pure and light. He passes through all the entrances of the grotto, carried swiftly through every narrow passage, in the midst of which sits a golden nymph, surrounded by a golden chamber, resplendent above. And what is more, upon entering, he treads upon a golden floor, and all the furnishings are made of shining gold. But you, who strive to reach the principles of such a profound matter, lest you err in the wandering paths of Trevisanus, go straight to the cave, and from there take what appears most precious, spare neither expense nor effort. Meanwhile, beware of applying living sulfur or mercury, or even any putrid or infected water arising from their vapor, but rather seek pure and purified metal, in whose mass the living spirit lies hidden, desiring to be freed from its bonds and dark prison so that it may be elevated into the air. And this mass, which was burdened by its natural and original weight, once it has been relieved of it and made lighter, is lifted up into the air, and what was formerly hard is now softened by the art that imitates nature. This art commands retrogradation to occur by the usual way and method, so that the enclosed seed may be released from its long imprisonment like a vegetative spirit, and no longer fear the bonds of that hard mass. Nor should this seem strange to you, for the germ of gold sometimes sprouts of its own virtue and is carried upward into the air, no differently than agile ivy climbing and clinging to a wall, spreading all around, and with its leaves and roots penetrating every crack in the wall it meets, until at last the wall collapses. In the same way, the living sprout of gold, planted in the stone, seeks and explores all the empty spaces within and moves through them, spreading into the air, or at least covering the surface of the same stone in many places, and whatever place it firmly holds, it purely gilds. From this, there are two things the artist must carefully attend to, namely, what material to choose first, and then how to regulate and govern what has been chosen, so as to bring it forth and make it appear, so that it may be dissolved by a gentle and slow heat. These two things the ancients hid in endless darkness, often rendering their speech intentionally broken, and making useless digressions. Therefore, investigate with focused eyes, and keep the matter which you have found through such noble pursuits along winding paths and many errors. For indeed it is not so difficult to find the matter which must be taken, but rather to make this same matter fit and capable, that is the work, that is the labor. This work requires nothing except what is simple and not mixed with any other matter than that which, by the fumigation of pure sulfur and the attraction of its like and equal living part, has been formed into gold. Yet each person prepares it differently, and perhaps there is not one and the same method of preparation, provided only that the same pure thing is clearly seen to have been reduced and left by itself. In this the artist must labor, closely imitating nature. There, nature, constantly moved and directed by the artist's hand, will keep its order and course. For when the compact matter has been resolved through the help of art and has offered itself up to external force, revealing itself in a definite offspring according to its kind, what remains must be placed in a secret place and treated by nurturing it over a long time with continuous heat, gradually returning to it its proper nourishment. Nor let delay or a determined length of time weary you, for everything that is born has a set period and a fixed time of coming forth, until it completes its perfect cycle and emerges into the light. And just as an unformed fetus grows in the mother's womb while the infant is being formed, so the place wisely chosen, to which you entrust the seeds of gold, will nurture them, promoting their development through continual progress until they grow into mature and desired fruits. Then you shall provide a gentle and appropriate fire for growing and perishing things, and continually add a balance of moisture and heat, which they wrongly call dung or baths of Mary. You must supply a constant and even heat, lukewarm, mild, and suitable, for uneven heat, sometimes excessive and sometimes deficient, is useless for generation. Moreover, you should not enclose a large quantity of matter in a small vessel, for when it is dissolved with gentle heat, it cannot express its strong powers. Neither should you be overly concerned about having a large quantity, since once you have obtained even a small amount of this blessed powder, you will not desire to make more or another anew, for whenever needed, you can multiply it. Nor should you undervalue it if this blessed powder shows you its proper signs clearly when it manifests and displays various colors. And although you primarily seek the red color, you should not despise the white, yellowish, or black either, for this black, namely, clearly shows you the beginning of the great work and opens for you the doors to the entrance of the secret. Wherefore, when you have already discerned by unique art the sequence of this most noble work and the clear signs of the colors, conceive hope for the rewards long promised, for by the grace of God the golden powder will be present for you, which will instantly convert any metal into gold, using only the smallest portion of itself. And just as a small amount of cheese, dissolved in water and fire, when the curd is missing, instantly curdles and sets the pure milk poured into the vat, converting that milk into its own form, so also this blessed powder will stop and fix any mercury, and convert it into the celestial and pure form of gold, more refined and noble than natural gold. This same powder can also be increased, so that afterward you will not need to worry about repeating the work once completed or making it anew, since its power can be increased even more, such that the smallest portion of the powder may transmute an immense quantity of mercury, whether because the light and perfectly dissolved spirit penetrates the deepest parts of the body and mixes itself throughout all its viscera, or rather because the powder, long cooked, enclosed, and frequently recombined into itself, becomes more concentrated, thickened, and multiplies its strength. And just as a small amount of saffron dropped into pure water spreads and multiplies its abundant color with a pleasant fragrance, so also a great power in a small quantity of the powder penetrates and passes through all parts of the liquid metal. Moreover, no work is more arduous, no labor greater, and in none does art more glory than in achieving the gradual moistening and softening of metals. At last, little will remain for you to understand on your own regarding the rest of the work. For all things are held and bound together by a single bond. And from this is understood the method of the gentle fire, the place and proper measure of the stone, and also the color variously diffused beneath the desired powder, as well as how the stone is to be multiplied. All these things you will clearly and joyfully understand, if you observe and retain the sequence of events through long practice. Book 3. If anyone seeks the seed for making gold, or desires to know the principles of silver, let him not despise first learning the different degrees of fire. For there are many by which one must proceed, yet two are most principal, one imitates the nature of calmness, the other is suited to a violent art. The latter, with great force, strives to expel the seed enclosed in solid gold by marvelous bonds, but only after, as will soon be shown, you have dissolved the gold and rendered it moist, putrid, well-tamed, subdued, and softened so that it can easily endure the strong fire, and be inflated, sublimed, and lifted up through evaporation. The former, gentle fire, nourishes and cherishes the extracted seed of gold, neither burning the work through excessive heat nor allowing it to cool before it wonderfully composes itself and places itself as perfected by its own power. You, however, shall take plates of pure gold, crush them, and grind them down into something like powder or river sand, and triturate them extensively until they are internally dissolved by their own moisture and putrefied into liquidity. For like is joined to like, and that which is similar to gold must be sought, since what is similar to gold alone can dissolve gold itself. It is also beneficial at times to pour in a generous amount of dew, that is, the moisture, of its own seed, but by no means should you accidentally mix in anything foreign. For you must not be ignorant of this, every like delights in its like, and is even strengthened from the outside by its own kind, especially since nature seeks nature and repels its opposite. Therefore, let it not displease you to search for that which is similar to it, wherever it may be hidden, whether concealed deep in mountains, or drawn from the crags of the sea, or clinging in the midst of springs, or even brought down from the heights of heaven, or appearing, or hiding, in any other place in the world, whatever it may be. The key is that through its strength and power you may be able to dissolve what has been so firmly joined and compacted. So when the substance becomes moistened, you will place it in the bottom of a small vessel, not without moderation and order. It is necessary for the material to remain equally spread within it so that one and the same heat may penetrate it equally from every side, driving and directing the vapor throughout. The vessel in which the gold, thus properly prepared, is to endure these strong heats must be a small cucurbite, retort, made from clay and off-white earth resembling aged marble. This cucurbite should be glazed, and covered with a glazed cap, so that it may collect the subtle vapors. Then place the cucurbite with its contents onto a perforated furnace, in which the fire is strong, sealed and glowing within, so that the heat strikes the vessel directly from below and brings the entire vessel to ignition. At last, the substance of gold, soaked and moistened in its own former liquor, who would believe it, yet the ancient philosophers witnessed it, dissolves and gradually adheres to the walls of the vessel, and soon seems to rise slowly toward the top of the glass. And just as it was once hard and heavy, so now it becomes volatile, soft, and rarefied, and separates and dissolves itself from its mass, becoming subtle and clear. Moreover, just as it was at first dark and obscure, so now at first it becomes clothed in snowy whiteness, then soon afterward with a bluish pallor, and finally tinged with a lightly violet hue, shining with a celestial coloration and persisting in a golden vapor or aura. This, however, is not only known by these signs and indications but can also be perceived by its taste, if it shows even a slight bitterness, scarcely noticeable to the mouth. It can likewise be recognized by a dull sound, which is difficult to discern unless one listens attentively, and also by a smell that is not strong, unless it carries the stench of burning sulfur. And what is more, you may at times see this mass turning upward and dissolving itself into flowing water, whose liquid, if gathered at the proper and opportune time, may serve two purposes. First, it can be used with gold that has already been dissolved and skillfully triturated, to soak it in the moisture of its own seed. Then, when this moisture or liquid has been properly mixed, it can serve to restore aged pearls or beads that have grown dull over time to their original and natural luster, or even to artificially form new ones using this clear and pure liquor. Just as nature forms pearls in the sea by the operation of a moist vapor acting upon a fixed substance, so too may these be formed by art, through the application of this liquid, if it be properly and naturally composed. You could scarcely find a more fitting or marvelous example, one which human art can imitate, than that of the pearls, bacchae, around which nature so cunningly plays. Just as certain shells, cochlea, open themselves on the seashore, gaping and, lightly filled with the dew of conception, are stirred at the generative hour, and then, thus impregnated, after a certain time bring forth their offspring, so too may art follow this process. In this, also, we find an analogy with the art of painters, who teach us the various kinds of colors to imitate. Moreover, after you have extracted from the glass vessel the snow-white gold, and all has been sublimated, you will place this same whiteness once again into a glass vessel. You must seal the vessel's mouth with molten glass, and place it in a hypocaust or a furnace, under which you place a burning lamp that provides a steady, gentle heat. Above this heat should be ashes, carefully arranged so that the seeds of gold are preserved and enclosed at the bottom of the vessel. When these substances have long remained sealed and cooked in the glass vessel, they will first show various colors. Of all these, the black is what we seek and desire first and foremost. After the black, through intermediary colors, comes the white, for the final stage cannot be reached without passing through the intermediate ones. These will appear in as many hues as those in the rainbow, or as many as the eyes Argus had when transformed into a peacock. When the matter is tinged with black, you may believe that you have provided it with sufficiently gentle and proper heat, just as a female embraces the male in her sweet bosom, nourishes and warms him, and he, now comforted, slowly instills into her his love. And at last, through this sweet union, they together, in languid delight, bring forth a rich offspring. Hence, the blackened matter begins gradually, day by day and without ever ceasing, to shed its dark garment, moving through the varied colors, from one to another, until finally, by the power of that great union in which it rotted away, was reconstituted, and regained new strength, it becomes white. Therefore, beware at this stage not to remove or lessen the gentle heat in any way. Rather, you must nourish and support its intrinsic, generative, natural power with the penetrating warmth from outside, just as a bird continuously incubates her eggs with warmth and care, attentively sustaining the vigor necessary for the chicks to be born. This method and practice you must observe until, after a full revolution of the sun and the passing of the appointed time, the matter is completely sprinkled with abundant whiteness. You must patiently endure up to this period and goal. Here the horse is loosened, here is the limit of the sea, where you will rejoice to have completed the course of such great labors. And now the time has come, when, exhausted from labor and sweat endured to the utmost, you will receive due rewards. Therefore, take the weight of pure living silver, prepared in the usual manner, which you will place in a triangular vessel, and place and fit it in the middle of the fire. When it begins to boil and send forth smoke upward, then you will cast a small particle of your perfected powder from above, and you will fan the fire with bellows more and more. This living silver will shortly, which will seem strange to you, melt into the form of liquid silver, and then you will see it poured into a narrow channel and drawn into a slender ingot. However, you must not stop here at all, for a long journey still remains to be undertaken, which you must diligently carry through and complete until you happily arrive at the gate. I advise now that no one remove the administered work from the fire, lest it lose or diminish the heat so long conceived, but rather should tend and increase it, so however that the artist's hand can endure the touch of it, and the moving force of the heat does not exceed, but the heat is continuous and equally lasting, which kind and joyful nature can follow. Therefore, let no delay hold you back, but continue onward and complete further, once you have produced and brought forth a splendid whiteness of the desired and attained color. Yet do not hurry too much, faithful patience should be your companion, so that long delay, which otherwise could be caused by too much hastening, does not hinder you. There is no reason to hope to attain so many things in so short a time, which if you can obtain, you surely would not cease from the acquisition of such greatly desired things. When the fire has now further advanced, there will not then appear one color or one face alone, but before the purple or red color is to be seen, the white, tinged with a saffron cloak, changing in various ways, will endure a whole year. But when the red begins to appear and endures, it will seem to bloom like an ear of grain beneath the upper skin, and will also seem like a violet red and shining like a hyacinth. You must not yet stop there, but must proceed further, taking care not to stray from the right path you are walking. Nor should it then come to your mind, nor should anyone persuade you, to change the fire at all, unless you increase it just enough so that you can bear the heat of the vessel and touch it with your hand without harm. This you will observe as a rule and sure method throughout the entire work. By this very thing you will imitate nature. Moreover, if perchance any fault or omission has occurred among other things, nothing prevents you from correcting it or recomposing and restoring it anew, provided you have previously taken care and investigated these things well. But if you cease to nurture the fire so that the power or heat that continuously nourishes the fetus with its fuel is interrupted, your labor will be entirely in vain, for where the fire fails, all things will collapse and be reduced to nothing, which by no artifice can ever be repaired. On the contrary, if through impatience you increase the fire beyond measure and become tired of the delay, you will suddenly lose what you have prepared with such great time. Therefore, diligently take care that in whatever way you keep the heat continuous, warm, and tempered. Nor should you be unwilling or ashamed to sift the fine ashes and place them around the warm flask. Meanwhile, you will see the fetus grow and more intensely aim for a dense redness, until finally the 3rd year arrives, after which you will be free from all previous labors. For as soon as the full and perfect purple color appears, then you will not hesitate to take the blessed powder from the vessel and reserve it for various uses, either for transmuting metals into gold, or for helping the needy, or for curing human diseases. It is not, however, necessary to count these years so precisely that you may neither subtract nor add anything to them. For either the material, if it was suitable, can mature the course of the work, or if unsuitable, delay it, or if the heat is more or less intense than the proper measure, it can vary the time and place. Hence you will easily see the cause why the work was either prolonged or matured in the generation of its fetus. For a child born in the 7th or 11th month will not be illegitimate, although some attribute these things to the stars and gods. Moreover, there are some who calcine the stone and hold and burn it in a strong fire for 7 days, until, as they say, it is inspected. However, a good philosopher will not approve this in every respect, since nature does not seem to do anything similar. For if nature has begun the course, it preserves and continues it, and rejects its opposite. And so that you may more rightly complete the course which you follow and strive to perfect, I advise you not to disregard the space of a whole year in your work, and if you believe me, you will begin at the time of spring, when everything bears fruit, and nature is busy producing all things. You may perhaps ask about the number and weight of things to be prepared before the beginning of the work. But if you consider the truth, you will find only 3 principles, or even 2, or if you weigh the matter well, not more than 1. And these 3 will be found in gold alone, and moreover, you will include all these in a single weight. For when they are joined, they are not different, they exchange and communicate their weights to one another successively. This must be observed precisely according to the custom of goldsmiths, who separate gold and silver from the smallest particle of a great mass, will calculate and easily find the sum that remains in the residue. And although number and weight must be observed so exactly, it will nevertheless suffice for you to take only one of the 3 mentioned, which you will rightly administer as I have taught, or if perhaps you take 2 of them, there is no need to add more. For what remains I will teach you, from which, if you investigate these things, you will know why you should be content to work with a small quantity and portion of matter. What remains to be said, and what the ancients admit they deliberately concealed, I will not propose with fictitious figures or riddles. Therefore, you, wisely, must by no means yield to this final labor, since it is brief and very small in craft, but of splendid use. First, therefore, you will mix a little of the medicine already perfected with yellow gold, and immediately you will see that it retains the power of the blessed powder, or when you have extracted the heavy seed of pure gold with great and difficult art, the method of which is sufficiently and abundantly set forth above, nor is it permitted to recount everything. You will mix and add to it soon an equal part of red powder. Then indeed you will apply slow and gentle heat, in which you will decoct it for 2 months, after which you will perceive the whole series of colors, which before with admiration you saw during the space of 3 years, openly manifesting itself, and finally, in a short time, you will gather and obtain those immense riches which you sought with the benefit of the art for such a long time, and you will repeat the same work again and again. For as many times as you complete this, so many times you will see the quantity of the powder and its quality increased, for it grows more quickly, and hence it also takes up another growing one, meanwhile retaining the former, resuming its power. It is not vain to believe that the old author sometimes increased it so much that if the whole sea were quicksilver, and in it a projection were made of even the smallest portion of this powder, that said sea, though immense and infinite, would be transformed into gold. The end.